workers, where at the same time in the city of Perth in Western Australia we still have high youth unemployment. And they're asking us to do better at making sure we're skilling Australians and getting them into work. And I've certainly indicated as Prime Minister that is a very big part of my vision for the future of this country, that we leverage this wealth to get more people into work with greater skills. Now, we will still need skilled migration and we will still draw on it, and it will be part of the mix, but we can't use skilled migration as an excuse for leaving that teenager unemployed in Perth when he or she could have got a job.
When you mentioned links with Britain and so on, and that to do with the war and so on, but at the moment, of course, you've pledged very much to continue your predecessors' devotion to the policy of helping, participating in Afghanistan. You see no end to that at the moment.
I had to make a parliamentary statement on Afghanistan last year. It was a good process. It caused us as a nation to have a debate at depth that we needed to have. And there are a variety of views in our country about our engagement in Afghanistan, and they came to the fore in that debate. But as Prime Minister, I'm very determined that we see the mission through there, and the mission is strategic denial of the ability of terrorist organisations, particularly Al-Qaeda, to use Afghanistan as a training place. And when it's used Afghanistan for that purpose in the past, some of those people have come and taken Australian lives in various terrorist incidents.
And of course, at the moment, there's one Australian who's in the news, and that you've said you don't approve of his activities very much, Julian Assange, and WikiLeaks and so on. He underlines the fact that, as far as he can tell, no one has been killed or even harmed as a result of the revelations that they've cascaded on the world and so on. But do you still feel very, very much opposed to that?
I do. I mean, Julian Assange is an Australian citizen and he is entitled to all of the rights and assistance that we afford our citizens, including consular support and assistance as he works his way through legal questions involving potential charges and legal questions from Sweden. But for me, I basically don't agree that WikiLeaks has got some sort of it hasn't got, in my view, any moral purpose. I can understand the moral purpose of whistleblowing. If you were the person with the piece of information about Watergate, then of course there was a moral purpose in making that piece of information available to the media, and we all know how spectacular that scandal was. But that's not what WikiLeaks is about, and it's not even claimed to be about that, some moral purpose about making an individual piece of information available. It's just this scattergun approach of saying, oh, look, we've got it, so let's just, shove it out there, irrespective of the damage done or the irresponsibility. And I, personally, don't see the value of that. Now, Mr Assange and I are never going to see eye to eye on it, and we're never going to persuade each other. That's neither here nor there. My job as Prime Minister is, when I'm asked, to answer questions honestly, and that is my view. My job as Prime Minister is to extend protections to Australian citizens, and that is being extended to Mr Assange.
There's another extraordinary crisis going on in Egypt, of course. I mean, triggered off by what happened weeks ago as well. How do you feel about, I mean, this country, Egypt, it seems so stable. Maybe it obviously wasn't as stable as it looked, but I mean, is it a trend that worries you, or is it just que sera, sera?
I think it's something we can understand in the sense of understanding people's legitimate yearning for greater freedom, for democracy, for their nation having structures that we in our country take for granted, people being able to determine their own future. Certainly we believe change is necessary, but we want the transition to be an orderly and peaceful process. It's for the Egyptian people to shape their own future, but change is needed, and we want to not see violence or chaos as change happens. in the circumstances that have been in Egypt in the last few days, we've certainly said to Australians don't travel there, and we're making available evacuation flights to get Australians out of Egypt.
Yes, and I mean, it's extraordinary. People predicted 2 or 3 weeks ago that what had just happened might spread throughout North Africa or wider in the Middle East and so on. It does seem to be maybe that freedom is contagious.
It may be, but I think it's something that in an individual country and in an individual system, people's aspiration, I think, for freedom is widespread, and people do look to see what is happening in other nations. But to see so many people come out on the streets and actually voice their yearning for change is really quite extraordinary.
Well, the time has rocketed by. We're at the end of our time. Thank you so much indeed for this, Prime Minister, and may I say a particular thank you for the warm welcome that Australia gave to the English cricketers at the time of the Ashes.
Now you're just being naughty. We'll get you back.
Fair enough. We'll look forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for our special programme, Frost Over the World from Canberra. And our special thanks, of course, to Prime Minister Julia Gillard for being with us today. Thank you for being with us too. Goodbye for now.
It is in the details. A look. A connection. The moments that reveal the truth. Award-winning documentaries from critically acclaimed filmmakers. Witness documentaries to open your eyes. At this time on Al Jazeera.
Opposition leaders hold talks with the Mubarak government, but with protesters refusing to leave Tahrir Square, have Mubarak's concessions done anything to accelerate the change and bring about the orderly transition of power Western governments talk about?
The Egyptian people want freedom.
Egypt's dilemma, an Al Jazeera news special.
As China undergoes profound changes, competition for jobs becomes a struggle to survive. 2 graduates fresh out of college seek employment in a city of 8 million people. Now entering the real world, the graduates become increasingly desperate and begin to question their college-trained talents. It's a time of hope and frustration for the workforce of the future. Faces of China at this time on Al Jazeera.
Standing their ground, protesters gear up for a new day of mass demonstrations against President Mubarak. Well, 15 days into their campaign, protesters aren't losing sight of their original demands, despite government promises of pay rises. Hello, I'm Sami Zaidan. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. So coming up, let's clean up the country. The Google executive arrested for sparking the revolution is released. The birth of a nation. South Sudan celebrates its decisive vote to separate from the north. And behind the Moscow airport bombing, a Chechen rebel leader promises Russia a year of tears. It's 0700 GMT, 9 a.m. in Egypt, where anti-Mubarak protesters